Segment Tesha Nikud Achat Nikud Aleph. Shema Kohen Ninve, Lech ukvotz et kol anshe Ninve. Shema Kohen Ninve, Lech ukvotz et kol anshe Ninve. Through this segment, you'll learn how to issue a command to one male. Before we learn how to do that, let's survey 3 ways to issue commands. The first technique employs a preposition. We saw this early in the first Jonah episode, alecha le. In that case, the expression was alecha lalechet el ninve. This particular technique is not common in the Hebrew Bible, but it does occur occasionally. The second technique arises from the yiktol conjugation as it stands, and it has to do with the instruction or injunction connotation that is available as one of the potential meanings for any yiktol expression. This is dependent on context to help the reader or the hearer understand that they should be inferring a command from the yiktol expression that they are reading or hearing. The third technique involves a distinct verbal form known as the imperative. Since it is a distinct form, it is not subject to misinterpretation that can be inherent with the yiktol injunctions. This third technique for issuing a command is the most common way that commands are expressed in the Hebrew Bible. Consider, for example, the command that we encountered very early in the very first Jonah episode, Lech el Ninve. The form Lech is a second masculine singular form. It is an imperative, and it arises from the verb halach, meaning go. This is the sort of form that we'll be concentrating on in this segment. A moment ago, it was stated that this form lech is second person. Actually, that's superfluous information. By virtue of being an imperative, it's automatically second person. This means that the speaker envisions the other person being present while the command is issued. It can be addressed in Hebrew to a single man, there will be a distinct form, to a single woman, feminine gendered object, that will be a distinct form, to a group of men or mixed gendered, that will be a distinct form, and a group of women or feminine gendered objects, that will be a distinct form. We'll begin by learning the masculine singular. Hebrew is also able to express an idea that represents an instruction to one's self, coaxing oneself to action. That would be first person, either singular or a group, plural. Hebrew is also capable of issuing instructions to persons who are not present, third person stance. We'll talk about these specialized forms later on. For the time being, we're concentrating on what's known grammatically as the imperative, second person. Take a moment to look again at the excerpt that formed the title for this segment. See whether you can identify which words are imperatives. Shema Kohen Ninve, Lech ukvotz et kol anshe Ninve. A simple way to recognize and formulate an imperative is to recall the second masculine singular yiktol form of a verb. Take, for example, tishma. Tishma. This is second masculine singular. It's yiktol. It means you will hear. In the table, notice the form directly below it. Incidentally, these are left aligned so that you will see that the tav is missing from the lower form. It simply reads Shema. This is the first word in the title excerpt, Shema Kohen Ninve. We may describe it as being spelled as the yiktol without the prefix tav hirik. As we move one column to the left, the column with the shoresh heading halach, notice that to say you will go, masculine singular, it's expressed telech, but to convert that into a command, go, it's expressed lech. Once again, the prefix, in this case tav tsere, is omitted in order to form the command. Tikbots becomes kavots. Tikra becomes kara. Ta'amod becomes amod. When a shoresh presents consonants that will assimilate or make other adjustments in the yiktol, for the most part, the imperative will mimic the adjustments that we find in the yiktol. So knowing the yiktol will make us more confident in expressing the corresponding imperative. The next few comments will show some exceptions to be aware of. For example, first yod verbs. First yod verbs will not mimic the theme vowel that we find in the yiktol. For example, shoresh amar. To say you will say, masculine singular, it's expressed tomar. Tomar. Notice the patach theme vowel under the mem. However, the imperative does not use a patach, but rather a holam. So in order to express the command say, it's pronounced emor. Emor. Notice the holam, not emar, which is a hypothetical non-existent form. This is presented in the table below in column 4. Consider next the imperative for first noon verbs. Two different things can happen, and for that reason, 2 columns in the table are devoted to first noon, column 5 and also column 6. Consider column 5, where we find the shoresh natan. The yiktol form, you will give, is titain, titain. The imperative follows suit as we've seen with other verbs, just dropping the prefix, and we're left with tain, meaning give. The case of another first noon verb, however, is different. So in column 6, we see nafal. To state you will fall, the indicative, the yiktol, it is tipol, tipol. We might expect that the noon would assimilate with the pei, as it did with natan, and disappear, but this is not the case with nafal. Instead, it formulates as though the noon is not a weak letter. We find then nafol, nafol, meaning the command fall. Before leaving this table, let's look over the first 3 columns as well. The first column presents a first yod. It's behaving normally, what we might expect as far as dropping the prefix in order to produce the imperative. Thus, teshev, you will sit or dwell, becomes simply shev, sit or dwell. As is explained just below the table, there are a few first yod verbs which retain the first radical yod. That is to say, there are some which do not behave like yashav, losing that prefix, losing the first yod along with it. There are some that retain it. The most common of these is yara, the verb to fear. It will retain its first yod. So, for example, the expression fear the Lord, issued as a command, an imperative, this is expressed yara et Adonai. Yira et Adonai. The first yod is retained in this imperative. Column 2 gives us an idea of how a hollow verb such as shuv will respond. Tashuv is the indicative, yiktol. You will turn. To convert this into a command, turn, we simply drop the prefix ta, and we are left with shuv, shuv. This is something that we find the Hebrew prophets expressing to their audience when they want them to turn, either turning away from evil or turning toward God. Finally, column 3 presents a third yod-hey verb. Allah has been selected as a sample. The indicative is ta'aleh, ta'aleh, you will ascend. Notice that when we form the imperative, while the loss of the prefix is typical, the theme vowel has shifted from a sagol in the indicative to a tsere. So, to command someone to go up, to ascend, it would be expressed ale, ale, not ale, with a segol.